What a way to end 2021. Team India, of course, becoming the first Asian side to win and win emphatically at the Centurion. We have, of course, the dashing JP Duminy to, of course, bring it all for us in terms of the post match review of this one. JP, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How was your closing stint to 2021? Was it good?
It was indeed. I mean, it's been a tormenting year in terms of the virus is going around, but 2021, we've sailed through. 2022 is, of course, upon us. But I want to talk about this sublime Indian win because, look, they've done it at the Gabba earlier this year. They did it in England. They've done it now in South Africa to start the series in a high. What do you have to say about this team India, JP?
I think first and foremost, it's to acknowledge that this would probably go down, particularly in Test cricket, when it comes to Team India, would probably go down as one of India's best years, in international cricket. And yeah, so sort of solely focusing on Test cricket now, and that pays great dividends to the work that has been put in behind the scenes, particularly in the performances that they've put out outside of the subcontinent conditions. We always know that when you travel to India or any subcontinent team, you're always going to come up and you up against it, with in terms of the conditions. But the way they've really remodeled the way they tour and they look upon the conditions outside of India has been formidable, and it's really paying dividends. I think one could say that the influence of the IPL and playing against different teams, playing with different players, would have some kind of impact on that. But also, I think you think about the techniques of the batters and how they've approached the conditions, particularly at Centurion. I think about how Mayank Agarwal and KL Rahul, how they started off that innings. That really set the tone. And particularly when you think about those conditions, you think about India winning the toss, electing to bat first. And yes, that is no doubt the right decision when it comes to Centurion. But more importantly, the discipline that they showed, the technical ability, and also the trusting of the technique, particularly away from home. That was probably the most impressive showing when it comes to that opening partnership. But all in all, this year has been formidable, and it's going to be a tough one to top in 2022.
Absolutely. I mean, the key is to trust a defense. KL and Mike did that, and I think they ran away with the game in that part. So let's start chronologically, of course, with what's gone on at the Centurion because it's been a fortress, like I mentioned. The toss was always going to be important, JP.
Mm.
Virat Kohli, of course, winning, batting first, 327, always going to be healthy. Do you think India got ahead of the game then?
Yeah, definitely. And when you look at Centurion, and history tells you that, particularly in first innings, if you're getting anywhere close to 300, you give yourself a good chance, particularly in that first innings. And I think if we then sort of critique South Africa's first innings, that's probably the area that they would really have a good discussion about where they let themselves down. With the success that South Africa has had over the years at Centurion, the first innings was always a big focus in setting up the test match, particularly when you think about the time of year that you're playing this test match in December, and the overhead conditions and how hot it can get, and what that produces for the pitch itself is that sort of variable bounce from time to time. It wasn't excessive in this test, but we have seen it in the past. But it does get difficult from a batting perspective when you get to day 3, day 4. So your first innings becomes vitally important to setting that stall. And this is where India did really well in getting that 327. Yes, it's a combination of a few things for me, in that the way South Africa started with ball in hand was probably very, very mediocre, and they would be first to admit that, because you're playing the first morning of a series. That's where you want to set the tone, even though you're bowling first. Now, there's a few things that you could sort of use as reasoning. The fact that South Africa hasn't played Test cricket in a 6-month period. First class cricket, only really 4 rounds of first class cricket has been played, and not many of those players have really played first class cricket. So there's not a lot of time spent in the middle. But going into the series, I'm encouraged to see that, or very much wanting to see an improved performance from a batting perspective, and that's something that South Africa would really want to focus on. But all credit to the way India started the series. They started with confidence. They won the toss, and it's not easy just to go in and bat first, even though it is the right decision, because there is always something in that first morning. But unfortunately, South Africa didn't put that to good use.
Absolutely. Now, of course, Dean Elgar was asked by Mikey Hazeman post-match, which was what was the difference between both the sides, and he went on to immediately say batting. That's something that you touched upon right now. Let's dwell a little bit more about that 117-run stand between KL and Mayank. I mean, was it just South Africa's pacers being rusty because, of course, they've not played that much Test match cricket this year, or was it just KL and Mayank applying themselves, like you said, and showing how it's to be done on these kind of surfaces?
I think the easy thing to say would be the sort of lack of consistency in from a bowling perspective for South Africa. But I don't want to take the shine away from how well they actually played. Yes, there were a few loose deliveries which they pounced on, which is expected of a top order sort of ability and players that KL Rahul and Mayank Agarwal are. But we mentioned it earlier, the trusting of a strong defense, particularly in these conditions, and then trusting your technique away from home. And I think that's something that has been really impressive, particularly with these two. It goes without saying that you have to also mention the fact that they're really good friends, so they form a really good partnership. And what's a standout as well is they know each other's games really well, so they can encourage one another while they're out in the middle, because we know, Test cricket comes with high pressure moments, and at times you need your partner to be there for you, to encourage you. And I think that's a great combination for them as well. But that hunger and determination to really do well away from home, we're seeing that a lot now, particularly from a KL Rahul. He's performed really well outside of the Asian conditions, and as you would see, Mayank Agarwal is really feeding off that as well. So that's been a formidable opening partnership for India.
They have, of course, KL getting another test done under his belt and another away test done. Like you mentioned, he's been prolific, of course. Let's talk about the bowlers right now because, look, everyone's kind of singing their name back home right now, JP, and rightly so. Because
Mm.
the last time India taught South Africa in those three tests, all 60 wickets, funnily enough, went to the Pacers. In this one, 19, of course, being bagged by Pacers as well. Talk to me about how India's pace attack have just gone leaps and bounds so forward in this game. It's remarkable.
No, it's interesting when we were doing sort of the pre-match game, sort of analysis and conversations around the bowling lineups and combinations. I think the real great benefit for India right now is the stocks that they have, particularly in the seaming department, and there's a huge amount of trust in the ability, the skill, and the understanding of what to do at various times in these conditions. And in the past, as Asian touring teams have come into South Africa, they've really struggled from a batting perspective, and they've shown that they can produce the goods now. But more importantly, we saw hints of it for periods of time in the last Test series, yes. But what's been most impressive this time around is that there's not a lot of bad deliveries getting bowled. They're asking the right questions all the time, and unfortunately, the South African batters haven't had the answers. And I mentioned earlier about the skill level, and when it comes, yes, it's one thing having the skill, but to be able to control it as well as particularly the three main seamers have done, has been truly impressive and been backed up again by Thakur and Ashwan, which is always a benefit.
Yeah, funny that Ashwin didn't play a big role that we thought he would, but nevertheless, India's Pacers, of course, happy and would be chuffed going into the second and third test. Right, let's ask you about the South African perspective here because we saw some of the fresh faces in Keegan Peterson, and we, of course, saw Marco Jansen take the test
Mm.
match cricket brilliantly. Would you like to make changes? Because we'll get you in the 2nd of Jan as well in terms of talking in great depth about the second test. But just right now, would you be scratching your head as a South African fan thinking, what do we need to do to turn this around?
I wouldn't be jumping at making too many changes, to be honest with you. And the reason why I say that, particularly if you think about the history of the last when I say history, I'm talking about the last 6 months of for South Africa and the challenges that many teams have had to face, but more focusing on South Africa and the lack of cricket that has been played. So if there's a trusting in a certain 11, and particularly younger players that have been coming in, and you're wanting to give them an extended run to really find their feet in international cricket. Yes, you're coming up against a formidable team that has had an exceptional 2021 in terms of Test cricket. So the last thing you want to make is sort of panic changes in, while this one's not scoring, let's see who can do the job. You got to trust your players. And you mentioned Peterson, Mulder. He hasn't quite fired yet. The potential is there, and they've shown a lot of trust in him. So I'd like to see them giving him an extended run to make sure that he has a great opportunity. And it's great to see a Marco Jansen really taking to Test cricket. He's a great prospect for the future. I think the sort of debate now going particularly into the second Test being at the Wanderers, the success that Olafir has had, particularly in the 4 round robin games, where I actually think he's actually played 3 of them there, taking 28 wickets in 4 games. That will be the question, whether there's an opportunity for him. Do you then bring out or drop a Jansen to give him that opportunity, or do you sort of ask the questions around Avian Mulder? Those are sort of the questions that they will sit with, but I would personally like to see an extended run for this group of players.
Okay, I like it in terms of stability, just building that team over there. And who, of course, better from a JP perspective to see how these youngsters go about their business in the second and third test. Right, a little bit more about this Indian team, and of course, a focus on their captain right now, Virat Kohli. By the way, if you guys are watching this and checking out a bunch of stats below, as you can see, you can check out all of it on cricket.com. It's a fantastic website for you guys to go check it out. So